The diesel exhaust hit my nose before I even saw the military Jeep. 6 a.m. sharp, and there it was, sitting in my driveway like it owned the place. License plate read, "Classified," in bold black letters. If you're watching Conflict Story, you know, it's never just a misunderstanding. I'm Dave Mitchell, 52 years old. Been guiding fishing tours on Lake Tahoe for the better part of 20 years. My morning routine's simple. Coffee, check the weather, grab my dad's old compass from the porch rail, and head down to prep the boat. That compass, brass thing he carried through Korea, never failed him, never failed me. But this morning was different. 2 blonde women stepped out of that Jeep like they were stepping off a movie set. Identical twins, maybe mid-40s, both wearing designer hiking boots that had never seen a trail. Behind them came a wall of muscle in full military fatigues, buzz cut, stone face, chest full of ribbons that caught the early sunlight. "Dave Mitchell?" The first twin's voice could cut glass. "I'm Karen Craig. This is my sister, Katie Craig, and this is Staff Sergeant Steve Johnson, United States Marine Corps." I set my coffee down. Something about the way she said Staff Sergeant didn't sit right. Too careful, too rehearsed. "Your illegal dock is destroying Lake Tahoe's ecosystem," she continued, pointing at my modest wooden pier. $80,000 in environmental damage, according to our assessment. Steve stepped forward, military bearing sure, but something felt off. His ribbons were perfect. Too perfect. Like costume shop perfect. "Sir," his voice carried that drill sergeant authority, "what you've built here violates 17 federal regulations. The contamination from your structure is killing fish populations across 3 square miles of lake. $80,000. The number hit like a sledgehammer to the gut. My entire business, my house, everything I'd built, it wouldn't cover half that amount. "I've had this dock for 12 years, I said, keeping my voice steady. "Built it with permits, inspections, the whole 9 yards. Karen smiled, predator smile. "Permits can be revoked, especially when environmental damage is this severe." She pulled out a manila envelope thick with papers. Official-looking documents with state seals, environmental impact assessments, fish mortality reports. The kind of paperwork that makes your head spin and your wallet empty. "We're not unreasonable people," Katie spoke for the first time, her voice identical to her sister's. "Dismantle the dock voluntarily, pay the restoration fees, and we can keep this out of court." Steve crossed his arms. "In my experience, sir, cooperation saves everyone a lot of trouble. Have you ever felt the ground shift under your feet while you're standing perfectly still? That's what this was. 12 years of building a life, and these 3 strangers wanted to erase it with a stack of papers. I picked up my dad's compass, still pointed north, steady as ever. "I need time to review these documents." 24 hours, Karen said. "After that, we involve the authorities." They climbed back into their Jeep, engine rumbling like a threat. As they pulled away, I noticed something odd. Steve's uniform had Marine insignia, but his vehicle tag said Army. Small detail, maybe nothing. But my dad taught me something during his fishing lessons. When the water looks calm on the surface, that's when you check what's moving underneath. I opened that envelope with shaking hands. Environmental reports, fish kill assessments, water contamination studies, all dated within the last month. All pointing to my dock as the source of ecological disaster. The morning sun glinted off the lake, same as it had every day for 12 years. Same fish jumping, same clear water lapping against my supposedly toxic dock. Nothing looked different, but $80,000, that number kept pounding in my head like a second heartbeat. I grabbed my phone and started making calls. Environmental services, county planning, state fish, and wildlife. Same story everywhere. "We'll look into it and get back to you." Government speak for, "You're on your own, buddy." By noon, I had my first real problem. Karen's Jeep was back, but this time, it wasn't alone. A pickup truck with Eco Action Alliance painted on the side had joined them. 5 people with clipboards and cameras were documenting everything. My dock, my boat, even my tackle shed. "Just collecting evidence," Karen called out. "Nothing to worry about." Evidence. The word tasted like metal in my mouth. Evidence of what? A dock I'd maintained legally for over a decade? I walked down to the water's edge and knelt by the pier, ran my fingers through the lake water. clear as glass. No dead fish, no oil slicks, no chemical smell. Just Lake Tahoe, same as it had been since before my grandfather first brought me here as a kid. But sometimes truth doesn't matter when lies come with official letterhead. That evening, I sat on my porch with a beer and that brass compass, watching the sunset paint the water gold. My phone buzzed constantly, clients asking about weekend trips, suppliers wondering about orders, the bank reminding me about my boat loan payment. Normal life, still happening while everything I'd worked for balanced on a knife's edge. What I didn't know yet was how deep this rabbit hole went, or how far some people would go to steal a man's livelihood with nothing but papers and intimidation. But I was about to find out. The sound of gravel crunching under tires woke me at dawn. I rolled out of bed and peered through the blinds. 3 vehicles this time, the military Jeep, that eco-action truck, and a white sedan with government plates. Coffee could wait. This couldn't. I grabbed my jacket and stepped onto the porch. The morning air carried the smell of pine and something else, diesel fumes from their convoy. Karen and Katie were setting up what looked like a command center on my property line. Folding tables, cameras on tripods, and enough paperwork to choke a courthouse. "Morning, Dave." Karen's voice cut through the mountain air like a chainsaw. "Hope you don't mind. We're documenting the contamination for our federal report." Steve emerged from the Jeep, but something was different about him today. Yesterday's perfect posture had a slight slouch. His uniform looked wrinkled. Real soldiers I knew from my Army days never had wrinkled uniforms. A woman in a county inspector's jacket approached my porch. Badge read, "Environmental Compliance." She looked nervous, kept glancing back at the Craig sisters like she was waiting for permission to breathe. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm here to conduct an emergency assessment of your dock structure, state mandate." Emergency assessment. Yesterday my dock was fine. Today it's an emergency. "I'd like to see the complaint that triggered this assessment," I said. She fumbled with her clipboard. Multiple anonymous reports, fish kills, water discoloration, toxic runoff, very serious allegations. Anonymous, of course they were. I watched her walk toward the lake, clipboard in hand, while Karen and Katie flanked her like bodyguards. Every few steps, one of them would point at something and whisper in her ear. The inspector would nod and scribble notes. Professional consultation, or professional intimidation. My neighbor Bill wandered over, coffee mug in hand. 74 years old, Vietnam vet, been living on this lake longer than anyone. If something was wrong with the water, Bill would know. "That hell of a circus you got going here, Dave." "Tell me about it. Bill, you notice anything different about the lake lately? Dead fish, weird smells, anything?" He sipped his coffee and studied the water. "Same as it's been for 40 years. Clear, clean, full of trout. What's this about?" I handed him the environmental report. Bill had been a supply sergeant in Nam. He knew military paperwork. His eyes went wide as he read. "Dave, this is horse shit. Pardon my French, but this is grade A government horse shit." He flipped through pages. "Look at these signatures. Half these departments don't even handle lake monitoring." That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Steve was talking to the inspector, and I could hear his voice carrying across the water. But his accent had changed. Yesterday he sounded like a drill sergeant from Georgia. Today he sounded like California, like Surfer Boy, California. "Bill," I said quietly, "what do you make of the Marine over there?" Bill squinted at Steve for a long moment. Then his face went hard. "That boy ain't no Marine." "How can you tell?" "His ribbons are wrong. Combat action ribbon above his good conduct medal. Any real Marine would know that's backwards. Plus, he's got Navy achievement ribbons mixed in with Army commendations. Kid's wearing a salad that makes no sense. A fake Marine, working with the Craig sisters, trying to destroy my livelihood with phony environmental reports. Have you ever felt that moment when the pieces start clicking together, but the picture they're making is uglier than you thought possible? The inspector finished her lake walk and headed back to her car. Karen intercepted her halfway and they had an intense conversation I couldn't hear. Money changed hands. Not much, just a folded envelope, quick and subtle. But I saw it. The inspector drove away without saying another word to me. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "Mr. Mitchell, County Environmental Services. We've completed our assessment of your property. You have 72 hours to begin dock removal or we'll initiate seizure proceedings." It's 72 hours? What about due process? What about my right to contest these findings? Sir, when there's imminent environmental danger, emergency protocols take precedence. Have a nice day. Click. I stared at the phone. 12 years of following every rule, paying every fee, getting every inspection, and they could wipe it all out with a phone call. Karen approached my porch, that predator smile wider than ever. Rough morning? What do you want? It's same thing we wanted yesterday. Dock removal, restoration fees, and your cooperation. Only now it's not negotiable. And if I refuse? Steve stepped up beside her, still trying to look intimidating, but now I knew he was just an actor in a costume. Sir, I've served in 3 combat zones. I've seen what happens when people don't follow lawful orders. Which zones? I asked. His face went blank. Excuse me? You said 3 combat zones. Which ones? Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria? Steve's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Karen jumped in fast. We're not here to discuss Steve's service record. We're here to discuss your compliance. But the damage was done. I'd rattled him, and we all knew it. That afternoon, I drove into town and made a stop at the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall. Bill had suggested it. If you want to check up on a soldier's story, he'd said, talk to soldiers. The VFW was exactly what you'd expect. Wood paneling, American flags, and old-timers playing poker in the corner. I found the post commander, a gruff man named Eddie, who'd lost his left arm in Desert Storm. Steve Johnson, you said? Marine Staff Sergeant? That's what he claims. Eddie pulled out a laptop and started typing. Military personnel records, veteran databases, unit rosters. After 10 minutes, he looked up with a frown. Got 3 Steve Johnsons who were Marine Staff Sergeants in the last 20 years. One died in Fallujah, one's in a wheelchair in San Diego, and one's been retired for 15 years and lives in Florida. None match my guy. Not even close. I drove home through the mountain twilight, past lake houses where normal people lived normal lives. People who didn't have fake Marines and government inspectors camping on their property. But as I pulled into my driveway, I saw something that made my heart sink. A county tow truck was backing up to my boat trailer. Karen stood by her Jeep, talking on her phone. When she saw me, she ended the call and walked over. New development, Dave. Turns out your boat's been operating without proper environmental certification. County's impounding it, pending investigation. My boat. 24 years I'd been running that boat. It was how I made my living, how I fed my family, and they were hooking it up to a tow truck like an abandoned car. You can't do this. Actually, we can. Emergency environmental protection supersedes personal property rights. I watched them tow away everything I'd worked for. The boat that had taken thousands of tourists on Lake Tahoe fishing trips. The boat that had paid for my house, my truck, my life. Gone. That night, I sat on my porch with my dad's compass and a bottle of whiskey. The lake stretched out before me, dark and quiet. No boat, no business, no way to fight back against people who could rewrite reality with fake documents and crooked inspectors. But something Bill had said kept echoing in my head. When you're dealing with liars, make them tell their lies in public. Maybe it was time to test Steve's war stories in front of people who'd actually been to war. The Lake Festival planning meeting was set for Thursday night at the community center. Perfect timing, since half the town would be there, including every veteran within 50 miles. I'd made some calls. The smell of burnt coffee and old carpet hit me as I walked into the meeting hall. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows, American flag in the corner, and about 60 people scattered around discussing booth permits and parade floats. Normal, small-town business. But tonight wasn't going to be normal. Karen and Katie had claimed seats in the front row, Steve positioned behind them like a bodyguard. They'd been spreading their story all week, the environmental terrorist with his toxic dock, threatening Lake Tahoe's pristine waters. Some people were buying it. I took a seat in the back, next to Bill, and 3 of his VFW buddies. Eddie from the Post had driven up from town, along with Tom Reeves, a Navy SEAL who ran the local outdoor gear shop. Word travels fast in veteran communities, especially when someone's claiming military service they never earned. Mayor Patricia Chen called the meeting to order. First item tonight, environmental concerns regarding private docks on the North Shore. Karen stood up, papers in hand. Thank you, Mayor Chen. As you know, we've documented severe ecological damage from illegal dock structures. The contamination is spreading. She had charts, graphs, official-looking documents that meant nothing to most people but looked impressive. Fish mortality rates, water toxicity levels, bacterial counts, all complete fabrication, but presented like scientific fact. Our environmental consultant, Marine Staff Sergeant Steve Johnson, has extensive experience with water contamination from his service in Iraq and Afghanistan. Steve stood up, chest puffed out, trying to look military. Ma'am, I've seen what happens when water supplies get compromised. In Fallujah, we had entire villages. Excuse me, Tom Reeves interrupted from the back. Which unit were you with in Fallujah? Steve's face twitched. 2nd Marine Division. What years? 2003 to 2005. Tom nodded slowly. I was there in '04. What forward operating base? Steve's mouth worked silently for a moment. FOB, Liberty. Wrong answer. Every veteran in the room could feel it. Eddie raised his hand. Staff Sergeant Johnson, what's the Marine Corps motto? Semper Fi. Steve's voice cracked slightly on the words. And what's the difference between a Marine and a soldier? Steve stared at him, like he'd been asked to explain quantum physics. Well, Marines are tougher? The room went dead quiet. You could hear the air conditioning humming in the wall unit. Bill stood up slowly. Son, I spent 13 months in the jungles of Vietnam. Lost friends who'll never come home. You want to tell me again about your service record? Steve's face was red now, sweat beading on his forehead. I don't have to answer to you people. Actually, you do. Tom Reeves pulled out his phone. Because stolen valor is a federal crime, and claiming military service you never performed to defraud civilians, that's a whole different level. The room erupted, veterans standing up, voices raised, people demanding answers. Karen and Katie looked like they wanted to crawl under their chairs. Mayor Chen banged her gavel. Order! Let's have order! But there was no putting this genie back in the bottle. Steve Johnson, fake Marine, had just been exposed in front of half the town. Karen tried damage control. Steve's military background isn't the issue here. The environmental damage is real, documented, and immediate. By who? I stood up, my voice carrying across the room. By the inspector you paid off? By the fake reports with forged signatures? That's slander? Is it? I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Karen's voice, crystal clear. We need those reports backdated to last month. Make sure the contamination levels look severe. I'd been recording our conversations since day one, old habit from dealing with insurance companies after my dad's accident. The room exploded again, people shouting, chairs scraping, the mayor's gavel working overtime. In the chaos, I saw Steve slip toward the exit. But Bill was faster, 74 years old, but he moved like a man half his age and blocked the door. Where you going, hero? Thought Marines never retreat. Steve tried to push past him. Big mistake. Bill might be old, but he's still solid muscle, and he had 40 years of anger at people who dishonor military service. I was a cook, Steve finally shouted. Okay, I was a cook on a supply base in California. I never saw combat, never left the continental United States. They hired me to play a part. The room went silent. Who hired you? Mayor Chen asked. Steve looked at Karen and Katie, who were already heading for the exit. The Craig sisters, $5,000 to play the Marine consultant, said it would make their environmental case stronger. $5,000. They'd paid him $5,000 to help them steal $80,000 from me. What happened next was beautiful in its way. The same crowd that had been split on the environmental issue suddenly wasn't split anymore. Nobody likes being lied to, especially by outsiders who think small-town people are stupid enough to fall for fake uniforms and forged papers. Karen tried one last desperate play. The environmental damage is still real. Check the water yourself. We did, said Jenny Martinez, the town's actual environmental coordinator. Took samples yesterday after your inspection. Water's cleaner than it's been in 5 years. Whatever game you're playing, it's not about the environment. I watched Karen and Katie gather their papers and head for the door, their perfect plan falling apart in real time. But as they reached the exit, Karen turned back to me with a smile that made my blood run cold. You think this is over, Dave? This is just beginning. We've got resources you can't imagine. and we don't give up easy. The community center door slammed behind them, leaving their fake Marine to face a room full of real veterans. Steve was babbling now, trying to explain himself, but I wasn't listening. I was thinking about Karen's parting words. Resources I couldn't imagine. What did that mean? I was about to find out, and it was going to hurt worse than losing my boat. Because some people, when you corner them, don't surrender. They double down. And the Craig sisters were just getting started. The sound of sirens at 5 a.m. isn't something you forget. I stumbled out of bed to see red and blue lights painting my bedroom walls like a disco from hell. 3 sheriff's cars in my driveway, an ambulance, a fire truck, half the emergency services in the county, all focused on my little piece of Lake Tahoe. I threw on clothes and ran outside. Sheriff Martinez was talking to a man in a hazmat suit while deputies stretched yellow tape around my dock. What's going on? Dave Mitchell? Sheriff Martinez looked grim. We received reports of a chemical spill from your property. Hazmat teams here to assess contamination levels. Chemical spill. I looked at my dock, same wooden structure I'd built with my own hands 12 years ago. The only chemicals within 100 yards were a can of boat wax and some fishing line cleaner. Sheriff, there's no chemical spill. Someone's playing games. That's what we're here to determine. The hazmat guy finished whatever he was doing and walked over. Preliminary readings show elevated toxin levels in the water around the dock structure. We'll need to expand the containment zone. Containment zone. They strung more tape, wider this time, until half my property was inside their yellow perimeter. Then they posted signs. Danger, toxic contamination, authorized personnel only. I watched my neighbors gather on the road, keeping their distance, whispering among themselves. Mrs. Patterson from next door looked at me like I'd been cooking meth in my garage. Have you ever been guilty until proven innocent? It's a special kind of helpless rage. By noon, the news van arrived, Channel 8 from Reno, with a reporter who looked like she'd rather be covering anything else. She set up her shot with my dock in the background, the yellow tape making it look like a crime scene. This is Sarah Kim, Channel 8 News, reporting from Lake Tahoe, where environmental officials are investigating what may be one of the worst private dock contamination incidents in Nevada history. Worst in history, my little fishing dock. I tried to approach the reporter, but a deputy blocked my path. Sir, you need to stay outside the containment area. It's my property. Not anymore. States assuming jurisdiction under environmental emergency protocols. My phone started buzzing. First call was from my insurance company, canceling my policy due to environmental liability concerns. Second call was from the bank, demanding immediate payment on my boat loan since the collateral had been impounded. Third call was from a client, canceling a weekend fishing trip because he'd seen the news. Word travels fast in the digital age, and all of it was bad. That afternoon, Karen and Katie drove by slowly in their Jeep, windows down, smiling like they'd won the lottery. They didn't stop, didn't say anything, didn't need to. I was standing in my driveway, watching my life disappear behind yellow tape, when Bill walked over with a thermos of coffee and a grim expression. Dave, you need to see this. He handed me a tablet computer showing a Facebook page, Save Lake Tahoe Environmental Action, posted 2 hours ago. Photos of my dock with captions like, Toxic death trap poisoning our waters, and Local man's greed threatens entire ecosystem. The page had 3,000 followers already, comments rolling in faster than I could read them. Arrest this monster. Sue him for everything. How many fish died for his profit? 3,000 people who'd never met me, never seen my property, never questioned the story they were being fed, but they knew I was guilty because the internet told them so. That gets worse, Bill said. Look at who's promoting it. He scrolled down to show shares and endorsements. Environmental groups, outdoor enthusiasts, fishing clubs. My own customers, people I'd guided on successful fishing trips, were sharing posts calling me an ecological terrorist. How'd they get this much traction so fast? Money, Bill said simply. You can buy social media promotion, fake followers, manufactured outrage. Someone's spending serious cash to destroy your reputation. That evening, I drove into town for supplies and got my first taste of public opinion. The grocery clerk avoided eye contact. The gas station attendant asked if I was that late guy from the news. The woman behind me in line moved to a different checkout. Small-town gossip moves like wildfire, and I was the arsonist. But the real kick in the teeth came when I stopped by Jenny Martinez's office at Environmental Services. Jenny and I had worked together on lake conservation projects for years. If anyone would give me a straight answer, it would be her. Dave, I'm sorry, but I can't discuss ongoing investigations. Jenny, come on. You know me. You know my property. Have you ever seen any environmental problems there? She glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. Dave, someone filed a federal complaint against you. EPA's taking over the investigation. It's out of my hands now. Federal complaint, Environmental Protection Agency, the big leagues. Who filed the complaint? I can't say, but Dave, be careful. Whoever's doing this has connections I've never seen before. Federal agencies don't usually move this fast unless someone with serious influence is pushing buttons. I drove home in the gathering dusk, past lake houses where normal people lived normal lives. People whose reputations hadn't been torched on social media, whose properties weren't wrapped in hazmat tape, whose livelihoods hadn't been destroyed by strangers with mysterious resources. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A for sale sign on my front lawn. Not my sign. I hadn't put my house on the market. I called the number on the sign. Automated voice system. You've reached Cascade Realty. This property has been listed for emergency environmental remediation sale. Current asking price, $400,000. $400,000. My house was worth $650. Easy. Someone was trying to force a fire sale. I sat on my porch with my dad's compass and tried to make sense of it all. The fake environmental reports, the paid-off inspector, the phony marine, the manufactured social media campaign, the federal complaints, and now an unauthorized real estate listing. This wasn't random. This wasn't amateur hour. Someone wanted my property, wanted it bad enough to orchestrate a complex fraud involving multiple government agencies and a professional-grade smear campaign. But who and why? The answer came at midnight when a black sedan pulled into my driveway and a man in an expensive suit knocked on my door. Mr. Mitchell, my name is Robert Wilson from Mountain Vista Development. I believe we can help each other out. Mountain Vista Development. I'd heard that name before, somewhere in the back of my mind. We're prepared to offer you $500,000 cash for your property. No inspections, no delays, no questions asked. You can be out of this mess by tomorrow morning. $500,000, $50,000 more than my asking price, if I'd actually been selling. Why would you want contaminated property? Wilson smiled. Let's just say we specialize in environmental remediation. We can handle all the cleanup costs, all the legal complications. You walk away clean. We handle the dirty work. I looked past him to the sedan, engine running, windows tinted, license plates I couldn't read in the darkness. And if I say no? Well, Mr. Mitchell, things have a way of getting worse before they get better. Federal investigations, criminal charges, civil lawsuits. Your life could get very complicated very quickly. He left his business card on my porch rail and walked back to the sedan. As they drove away, I finally remembered where I'd heard the name Mountain Vista Development. They were the company that had been trying to buy lakefront property all around Tahoe for the past 5 years, building luxury resorts, high-end condominiums, exclusive private clubs. Properties they couldn't acquire through normal means sometimes developed mysterious environmental problems. Problems that forced desperate owners to sell at fire sale prices. I was just the latest target. But unlike their previous victims, I knew what was happening. The question was, what could I do about it? The taste of copper filled my mouth as I stared at Wilson's business card, Mountain Vista Development. Corporate raiders disguised as environmental saviors. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, digging into Mountain Vista's history. What I found made my blood run cold. 12 properties around Lake Tahoe, all acquired in the last 5 years. Same pattern every time. Mysterious environmental problems, emergency government intervention, desperate owners selling at rock-bottom prices. Then suddenly, miraculously, the contamination disappeared and luxury developments rose from the ashes. The Hendersons had owned a beautiful cove on the South Shore, developed toxic algae blooms that required immediate remediation, sold to Mountain Vista for half market value. 6 months later, it was the site of a 5-star resort. The Kowalski family ranch had groundwater contamination that threatened the entire watershed. Emergency sale to Mountain Vista. Now, it's condominiums selling for $2 million each. 12 families, 12 destroyed lives, all feeding Mountain Vista's appetite for prime lakefront real estate. I was number 13. My phone rang at dawn. Unknown number. Dave, this is Linda Henderson. I heard about your troubles on the news. Linda Henderson, the woman who'd lost her family Cove. Mrs. Henderson, I was just reading about what happened to you. That same people, Dave, same playbook. Environmental crisis appears overnight. Government agencies swoop in. Social media campaigns destroy your reputation. Then a mysterious buyer shows up with cash. How do you know it's the same people? Because I spent 2 years and $50,000 investigating Mountain Vista after they stole our property. The Craig sisters work for them, professional environmental terrorists. They create fake contamination, bribe inspectors, manufacture crises. Karen and Katie Craig, professional liars. Mrs. Henderson, why didn't you expose them? Her laugh was bitter. I tried, filed complaints, hired lawyers, gathered evidence. You know what happened? More environmental problems, this time at my new house. Suddenly my well water was contaminated, my septic system was failing, my property was worthless. The message was clear: fight back and face total destruction. Dave, these people have unlimited resources and government connections. They own inspectors, judges, media outlets. You can't beat them playing by normal rules. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by the wreckage of my life. Yellow tape across my property, my boat impounded, my reputation destroyed, federal agents crawling through my finances. And somewhere, Karen and Katie Craig were probably celebrating another successful operation. That's when I remembered something Steve had said at the town meeting before his fake military story collapsed. They hired me to play a part. Play a part, like an actor. I called Tom Reeves at his outdoor gear shop. Tom, you still got contacts in the military database systems. Depends what you need. I need everything you can find on Steve Johnson. Real name, background, employment history, everything. 2 hours later, Tom called back. Your boy's real name is Stephen James Harrison. Failed actor from Los Angeles, got fired from 3 restaurant jobs last year, facing eviction from his apartment. No military service whatsoever. How'd you find all that? Nice friend of mine runs background checks for film studios. Harrison's been trying to get acting work for years. Mostly plays military types because he's got the look, but he's broke and desperate. Broke and desperate. Perfect target for the Craig sisters. Tom, you think Harrison might be willing to tell the truth about who hired him? For the right motivation? Probably, especially if he's facing federal charges for stolen valor. I drove to the county jail where they'd been holding Steve since the town meeting. Visiting hours, glass partition, phone on the wall. Steve looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Dave, he couldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry about all this. Steve, or should I call you Stephen Harrison? His face went white. How did you? Doesn't matter. What matters is that you're facing 5 to 10 years for stolen valor and fraud. Unless you want to help me stop the people who got you into this mess. Steve stared at the floor for a long moment. They said it would be easy money. Just wear the uniform, play the military expert, back up their environmental reports. How much did they pay you? $5,000 up front, 5 more when you sold the property. They said rich lake guys sell out fast when the government gets involved. $10,000. My life was worth 10 grand to them. Steve, I need you to testify about what they asked you to do. Names, dates, conversations, everything. They'll destroy me. They're already destroying you, and me, and 12 other families whose properties they've stolen. Help me stop them, and maybe we both get our lives back. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, there's something else. Something they didn't know I overheard. What? Phone call between Karen and someone she called Mr. Wilson. She was reporting on your case, said you were being stubborn, and might need additional pressure. Additional pressure. The words hit me like ice water. What kind of additional pressure? I don't know, but she mentioned your neighbors, your friends, said there were other ways to motivate someone. Other ways. I thought about Linda Henderson's new house developing mysterious problems, about how far Mountain Vista was willing to go to acquire property. That evening, I was sitting on my porch when Bill walked over with a grim expression. "Dave, we need to talk. Jenny from Environmental Services called me, off the record." "What did she say?" "EPA is expanding their investigation. They're not just looking at your dock anymore. They're checking soil samples from your entire property, your well water, even your septic system. Expanding the investigation, just like what happened to Linda Henderson when she fought back. Bill, I think they're going to contaminate my whole property, make it worthless, force me to abandon everything." "Could be, but Dave, there's something else, something that doesn't make sense." "What?" "Jenny said the EPA team isn't really EPA. She checked their credentials. Half of them work for private environmental consulting firms, the kind that specializes in remediation contracts. Fake EPA agents, of course. They're not investigating contamination," I realized. "They're creating it." Bill nodded grimly. "And once they finish poisoning your land, Mountain Vista Development will be the only buyer willing to take it off your hands." I looked out at Lake Tahoe, silver in the moonlight. Same view my dad had loved, same water that had sustained my family's livelihood for decades. But now it felt like I was watching it slip away, one manufactured crisis at a time. "Bill," I said quietly, "what would you do if someone tried to steal everything you'd worked for your whole life?" "I'd fight back, even if it killed me." "Even against people with unlimited resources and government connections?" Bill was quiet for a moment. Then, "Dave, sometimes the only way to beat the system is to make the system work against itself. Make the system work against itself." That's when I realized what I had to do. If Mountain Vista wanted to play dirty games with fake government agents and manufactured environmental crises, maybe it was time to give them a taste of their own medicine. But first, I needed to make sure I wouldn't be around to face the consequences. Because what I was planning could either save my property or land me in federal prison. Maybe both. The smell of gasoline and old wood filled my garage as I prepared for what might be the stupidest thing I'd ever done, or the smartest. Hard to tell the difference when you're desperate. I'd spent 3 days studying Mountain Vista's operation, their patterns, their weaknesses. Professional criminals always have one fatal flaw. They get comfortable with their system. My dad's old Army surplus radio crackled to life on the workbench. Bill's voice, distorted but clear. "Package delivered. They took the bait." Package delivered. Steve Harrison had been released on bail that morning, courtesy of an anonymous benefactor who'd posted the $50,000. Anonymous, but not really. Mountain Vista wanted their fake Marine back on the street, probably to disappear him permanently. They didn't know Steve had already given me everything I needed. I grabbed my dad's compass from the workbench and headed for the lake. The brass was warm in my palm, steady and true, like it had been through Korea, through my childhood fishing trips, through 12 years of guiding tourists on these waters. Tonight, it was going to guide me through the biggest gamble of my life. The fake EPA team had expanded their investigation to include my neighbor's properties. Mrs. Patterson's well water was suddenly showing concerning levels of contamination. The Johnson septic system was allegedly leaking toxic compounds into the groundwater. Same playbook: create panic, spread the contamination zone, force multiple property sales at once. But tonight, their system was going to eat itself alive. I walked down to my dock, past the yellow tape and warning signs. The water lapped against the wooden posts, same as it had for 12 years. Clear, clean, full of life. Tomorrow, if my plan worked, everyone would know the truth. If it didn't work, I'd probably be in federal prison by Christmas. My phone buzzed, text message from an unknown number. "Ready when you are. A friend?" A friend. Jenny Martinez from Environmental Services, risking her career to help expose the fraud that was destroying her community. I texted back, "Go." Across the lake, lights began flickering on in the Mountain Vista corporate offices. Emergency meeting called for 11 p.m. All the key players would be there: Karen and Katie Craig, Robert Wilson, their corrupt inspectors, their fake EPA agents. They thought they were meeting to discuss additional pressure for stubborn property owners. Instead, they were walking into a trap. Jenny had planted the meeting notice in their internal communication system, claiming that multiple federal agencies were asking questions about their Lake Tahoe operations. Panic meeting to coordinate their cover story. But there was no federal investigation. Not yet. The real federal agents were busy responding to an anonymous tip about fraudulent environmental reports, bribed inspectors, and fake EPA teams operating around Lake Tahoe. Anonymous tip backed up by Steve Harrison's testimony recorded phone calls, financial records, and a flash drive full of Mountain Vista's internal communications that Jenny had copied from their inspector's laptop. Sometimes the best way to beat criminals is to let them convict themselves. I sat on my dock, listening to the night sounds of the lake. Somewhere in the distance, sirens were approaching the Mountain Vista offices. Real federal agents this time. Real warrants, real arrests, real justice. My phone rang. Bill's number. "Dave, you seeing this?" I could hear the excitement in his voice. "What am I looking at?" And Channel 8 News, breaking story, federal raids on Mountain Vista development, charges of environmental fraud, bribery, extortion. They're perp walking the Craig sisters right now. I turned on my phone's browser and pulled up the live stream. There they were, Karen and Katie Craig in handcuffs, being led to federal vehicles. Robert Wilson trying to cover his face with a briefcase. A parade of corrupt inspectors and fake agents all facing federal charges. How many properties were involved? The reporter was asking. At least 15, an FBI spokesperson replied. This appears to be a sophisticated criminal enterprise that defrauded property owners and government agencies across multiple states. The financial damages are estimated in the tens of millions. Tens of millions. My little dock was just a tiny piece of their empire. But sometimes tiny pieces can bring down the whole structure. The next morning, I woke to the sound of trucks in my driveway. Not government vehicles this time. County maintenance crews, removing the yellow tape, taking down the contamination signs. Sheriff Martinez knocked on my door with a sheepish expression. "Dave, I owe you an apology. Turns out those environmental reports were completely fabricated. Your property's clean, always has been. What about my boat?" Being returned this afternoon, along with a formal apology from the county. I walked outside to watch the crews dismantle the fake contamination zone. Mrs. Patterson waved from her yard, friendly again, now that I wasn't an environmental terrorist. The Johnsons stopped by to apologize for believing the lies. Small-town forgiveness is quick when people realize they've been conned. That afternoon, my phone started ringing, clients wanting to book fishing trips, the bank calling to apologize for the loan acceleration, my insurance company offering to reinstate my policy. Amazing how fast your reputation recovers when federal agents arrest the people who destroyed it. But the best call came from Linda Henderson. "Dave, I can't believe you did it. You actually stopped them." "We stopped them. You gave me the roadmap." "What are you going to do now?" I looked out at Lake Tahoe, sparkling in the afternoon sun, my dock extending into the clear water, my boat tied up safely, my life slowly returning to normal. "I'm going fishing," I said. But even as I said it, I knew normal was gone forever, because I'd learned something about myself over the past week, something my dad would have been proud of. When someone tries to steal everything you've worked for, everything you love, you don't just lie down and take it. You fight back. Even if it scares you, even if you might lose, even if the odds are impossible. You fight back, because some things are worth fighting for. That evening, I sat on my porch with a beer and my dad's compass, watching the sunset paint the water gold. Same view, same peace, same life I'd almost lost. But I wasn't the same person who'd been drinking coffee on this porch a week ago. I was someone who'd learned that sometimes the little guy can win. Sometimes justice actually works. And sometimes when you're facing impossible odds, the best strategy is to make your enemies destroy themselves. The brass compass gleamed in the fading light, pointing north, steady and true, just like it always had, just like it always would. The morning mist was rising off Lake Tahoe when the final knock came at my door, 3 months after the arrests, 2 months after the trials, 1 month after Mountain Vista development had been dissolved by federal order. I opened the door expecting another reporter or a documentary filmmaker. Instead, I found a young woman in a business suit, holding a briefcase and looking nervous. Mr. Mitchell, I'm Sarah Chen, attorney for the Federal Restitution Fund. I have some papers for you to sign. Restitution Fund. The government had seized Mountain Vista's assets and was distributing them to the families they had defrauded. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a check. I had to read it twice to believe the number. $1.2 million, she said. Your share of the recovered assets, plus punitive damages, plus compensation for lost business income. $1.2 million, more money than I'd make in 20 years of fishing guides. There's also this. She handed me a deed. The Henderson property on the South Shore. Mrs. Henderson specifically requested that it go to you. She said you'd understand why. Linda Henderson's family cove, the first property Mountain Vista had stolen, now being returned to someone who'd appreciate it. I stared at the documents in my hands. Financial security, a beautiful second property, justice served. Everything I could have wanted. So, why did it feel incomplete? That afternoon, I drove to the state prison where the Craig sisters were serving their sentences. Karen looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, her authority stripped away, along with her designer clothes. Why? I asked through the glass partition. Why target my property specifically? She studied me for a long moment. You really want to know? Yeah, I do. Because you were nobody, small-time fishing guide, no political connections, no resources to fight back. Easy target. Easy target? That's all I'd been to them, a number on a spreadsheet. The other properties were chosen the same way, she continued. Elderly couples, single parents, people with limited income. We researched every target carefully. People who couldn't afford lawyers, couldn't fight government agencies, couldn't challenge our documentation. What about the Hendersons? They had money. Karen almost smiled. Linda Henderson made one mistake. She trusted the system, filed complaints through proper channels, hired legitimate attorneys, played by the rules. We owned half the people she complained to. But I didn't play by the rules. No, her expression hardened. You played dirty, just like us. That's why you won. I left the prison thinking about what she'd said. Played dirty. Maybe I had. But sometimes dirty is the only language bullies understand. That evening, I found myself at the VFW Hall, buying drinks for the veterans who'd helped expose Steve Harrison's lies. Tom Reeves raised his beer in a toast. To Dave Mitchell, who proved that sometimes the little guy wins. But as we drank, I kept thinking about all the little guys who didn't win. The families Mountain Vista had destroyed before I stopped them. The properties they'd stolen, the lives they'd ruined, the dreams they'd crushed. 12 families over 5 years. How many more would there have been if I hadn't fought back? Tom, I said, you think there are other operations like Mountain Vista out there? Other companies stealing property through fake environmental crises? Probably. Why? I pulled out my phone and showed him a news article I'd bookmarked. Resort development company in Colorado, targeting ranch properties, mysterious water contamination problems, emergency government intervention, forced sales at below market prices. Tom read the article, his expression growing dark. Same playbook. Different state, different players, same victims, families who can't fight back. I finished my beer and stood up. Tom, how do you feel about taking a road trip to Colorado? What did you have in mind? I pulled my dad's compass from my pocket, watching the needle swing north, steady and true. I'm thinking it's time to teach some new bullies about the consequences of picking on people who can't defend themselves. Tom grinned. When do we leave? Soon as I can arrange things here. Because I'd learned something important over the past few months. Justice isn't just about getting your own life back. It's about making sure other people don't lose theirs. The restitution money would let me do more than just guide fishing trips. It would let me travel, investigate, gather evidence, help families who were facing the same nightmare I'd survived. Linda Henderson called that evening. Dave, I heard about the Colorado situation. You sure you want to get involved in another fight? Mrs. Henderson, what would you have done if someone had helped you 5 years ago? She was quiet for a moment. I would have kept my family's property. Exactly. Dave, these corporate criminals, they're not going to stop. Even with Mountain Vista gone, there are others. This could become your whole life. I looked out at Lake Tahoe, peaceful in the moonlight. My dock, my boat, my home, everything I'd almost lost to people who thought they could take whatever they wanted from whoever they wanted. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, I said. The next morning, I started making calls. Private investigators, environmental lawyers, journalists who specialized in corporate fraud, building a network of people who could help families fight back against sophisticated criminals. My dad's compass sat on the kitchen table, pointing north toward my next destination, Colorado first, then maybe Nevada's neighboring states, wherever families were being victimized by fake environmental crises and corrupt government officials. Have you ever found your purpose by accident? That's what happened to me. I'd started out just trying to save my own property. I'd ended up discovering something I was good at, fighting bullies who pick on people they think can't fight back. The phone rang, area code 303, Colorado. Mr. Mitchell, this is Janet Rodriguez from Golden, Colorado. I heard about what you did with Mountain Vista Development. We need help. There's a company called Rocky Mountain Environmental Solutions, and they're saying our ranch is contaminated. I grabbed a pen and started taking notes. Mrs. Rodriguez, tell me everything from the beginning. Don't leave out any details. As she talked, I felt that familiar anger building, the same rage I'd felt watching my life get destroyed by professional liars. But this time, I knew what to do with that anger. I was going to use it to help people who didn't know how to help themselves. My dad's compass gleamed in the morning sunlight, pointing toward justice. And for the first time in months, I knew exactly where I was headed.